I was tired that evening. One of those late finishes, the kind where your shoulders carry the weight of the day all the way to the train platform. Oxford Circus was heaving, people shoulder to shoulder, rush hour chaos. I squeezed into the carriage and held on to the railing, trying not to lean into anyone, trying not to think too hard, just waiting to get home and recharge. That's when I noticed them. Two young women, maybe mid-20s, dressed sharply, tailored suits, crisp shirts, expensive-looking earrings. They sat less than 3 meters away, and one of them looked up and smiled at me. The other followed. I smiled back, politely. I had no idea who they were. Then one of them leaned forward slightly and said, "How are you doing, sir?" I didn't expect the word to land so loudly. Heads turned. People glanced over. That word, sir, it meant something on a packed London train. I smiled again, more genuinely this time. "I'm good, thanks," I replied. Without hesitation, one of them stood and offered me her seat. Just like that. I thanked her for the seat, graciously accepting the uncommon offer on a packed London train. "Sir?" they asked, still smiling. "Are you still teaching maths in that school?" she asked. "You taught us years ago, Mr. Quasi." Their faces were still a blur in my memory, but something about the way they said it made me pause. I tilted my head slightly. Then one of them added, "Mr. Cooper used to talk about you all the time." That was it. Mr. Cooper. It immediately clicked. Yes, Mr. Cooper. I remembered him. He had been one of our trainee maths teachers. We'd worked together for 5 or 6 years before he left the country. A gentle, thoughtful guy. Passionate about teaching, but never quite managed to win the favor of leadership. He had a rough time those last couple of years. His GCSE classes weren't hitting their targets. There were complaints about his marking. He was pulled into meetings constantly. Always about feedback. Always about underperformance. He'd come back from those meetings quiet and sunken. I could see it in his posture, the weight of being constantly measured but never mentored. One morning in late October, he handed in his resignation. I remember our last meeting. We sat in the same department office we always had. He told me he couldn't do it anymore, that the system had wrung the joy out of the work. I didn't try to talk him out of it. I just listened. I remember our last get-together in the pub, after his leaving speech that afternoon. Cooper was a great guy, he just wasn't lucky enough with his classes. He'd done everything in the book, yes, if you ask, a couple of fixes here and there was required. He should have been supported, coached, or mentored. Rather, leadership threw him under the bus. They made it a fault-finding mission. They would always go to his maths lessons unannounced, sit at the back and observe him. They knew what they were after, they knew their actions was damaging his morale, but they didn't care. They carried on regardless. They'd done the same thing the following year to a Kenyan teacher. I'd immediately advised her to leave. She'd resigned and left. 7 months later, she'd called to thank me, and said a lot about how supportive leadership was in her new school. She'd even joked about how whitewashed our leadership was. She was just stating the obvious. I'd asked about her new school. The leadership structure was quite different, and supportive, she'd said. Now here I was, hearing about him again, not as a teacher on the brink of quitting, but as a deputy head teacher. Then I snapped out of reality, forcibly stopping my daydreaming, dissociating my thoughts. "He's doing really well," one of them said. "He always spoke about how much he learned from you. And how supportive you were." I blinked, nodded slowly. "Oh wow," I said, smiling. "That's great." We all laughed a bit then, about their time in school, the things they remembered. Turns out both of them were working high-flying jobs in finance now, somewhere in Canary Wharf. One of them still remembered a maths lesson I'd taught on compound interest. I remembered none of it. But they did. They remembered me. As the train pulled into their stop, we said our goodbyes, warm, familiar, and sincere. I sat there, quiet, as the carriage rattled on. And then I remembered something else. A few months back, one of my former PGCE trainees had called me out of the blue. Just to say thank you. She'd said, "You have no idea what you did for me." Then she'd asked me a question I couldn't shake. "What are you still doing there, sir? You deserve better. You'd make an incredible leader, sir." Those words, her voice, now echoed beside the laughter on that train. I heard them layered together. Heard their clarity. And beneath it all, I heard my father's voice. I couldn't remember the quote exactly, but the meaning was always the same: go where you are celebrated, not where you are tolerated, or worse, where your skills are undervalued. That night, I didn't write a resignation letter. But I opened a new document. And for the first time in a long time, I started writing something for me. Something true. Something that began with a single line: "It was always October." And it wasn't just about me. It was never just my story. This was the shared script, the common denominator, for any teacher who happened to be both black and ambitious. You learned quickly, there was a ceiling. Not a glass ceiling. Glass can be shattered. This one was different. It felt like it was made of reinforced concrete, thick, silent, and immovable. If you're black, you couldn't just rise on merit. You had to overperform to be seen. Overextend to be considered. Overachieve just to stay in the same room. You had to be exceptional just to be treated as average. Black teachers knew this. We didn't need to say it aloud. It hummed in the hallways, passed between us in glances, shoulder shrugs, and exhausted nods. And even then, after doing double, triple, more than most, recognition wasn't guaranteed. Because ambition, in a black teacher, was often misread. What they called potential in others, they called pushy in us. What they called leadership qualities in others, they called aggressive. What they called initiative in others, they called arrogant. So we learned to shrink in strategic ways. To smile before speaking. To cushion the truth with disclaimers. To say thank you even when we were being used. But truth has a way of leaking through. And I knew, as I sat on that train, as I listened to my friends, as I recalled the students and the silence and the ceilings, that this wasn't just my burden. It was a story too many of us carried. And maybe it was time to write it down. As we sat that evening. It had miffed me slightly, I won't lie, listening to Hassan's story that evening, sitting there with a mouthful of dessert and a head full of questions. We were tucked away in a quiet restaurant down an alley behind Hoxton Station. One of those spots you wouldn't find unless you knew someone who knew someone. The kind of place that felt hidden from the chaos outside. Hassan was mid-rant, animated as always. He was telling us about how his head teacher had brought in a friend through the back door. No advertisement. No application process. No shortlisting or interviews. Just appeared. A deputy head teacher role. Given. Not earned. Handed out like a party favor. That's a legal requirement, I said, leaning in. That post should have been advertised. It's about equal opportunities. Diversity. That's policy. Hassan waved his hand dismissively. Forget policy. What are schools becoming, bro? It was David who asked that, his first words of the evening. Hassan smirked. Some of these heads, my friend, they're drunk on power. Moving like modern-day godfathers. Like mafia dons. We all laughed, but no one disagreed. No accountability. No questions asked. No transparency. No nothing, he added, reaching for his drink. I shook my head. And what about the governors? I asked, staring at him in disbelief. I mean, your school governors. Didn't they ask any questions? He rolled his eyes. Governors? What governors? He took a long sip and leaned back. Our head brought his man in to support Year 11 students, that's how he framed it. Said we needed a supply teacher for core subjects. 3 months later, man's walking around the building with a walkie-talkie and a shiny new job title, deputy head teacher. Mad, David said under his breath. Hassan grinned. Mafia move, bro. We'd all met on our PGCE program years back, same university, different placements across London. Since then, we'd made it a ritual to meet up when we could, grab a meal, share war stories, decompress from the madness. This was one of those nights. Banter, grief, truth, all on the table. David, quiet as ever, finally chimed in with his own horror story. My new head got rid of 3 assistant heads within 2 terms, he said. Didn't even blink. He rubbed his face, tired. In the first month alone, she emailed all 4 of us, associate assistant heads, and told us our services were no longer required. Wait, what? I asked. We'd just been appointed in July. Proper process. Rigorous interviews. Less than 2 months in the role, and boom, gone. Just like that. He paused. We were all black. Hassan let out one of his signature laughs, sharp, exaggerated, part disbelief, part defense. Bro, you're not even black. Stop trying so hard, bro. I cut in before it went too far. Technically, he is. Dad's Kenyan. Mum's Scottish. Let the man breathe. We all laughed again. Not because it was funny, but because we needed to. This was our therapy. Our way of exhaling the ache. Of scrubbing off the sharp edges of what it meant to be visible, expendable, underestimated. Just as we were settling the bill, Hassan glanced at the door. Oh, look who's here. He laughed hysterically. Oh wow. Man? Someone hasn't changed a bit. Always late as usual. Man, what's up with you girls? It was Kemi, same confident stride, box braids pulled into a loose bun, tailored blazer over a deep maroon dress. She was followed closely by Lorna, who I hadn't seen in over a year. Another teacher. Another survivor. And another untold story. We all stood, hugs exchanged, chairs shuffled, drinks topped up. Common Kemi, what's up? Are you still keeping those kids in check as usual? Hassan asked with his usual grin. She rolled her eyes, laughing. You know I don't do that anymore. I'm on SLT now. She said proudly, laughing. Serious? Oh my God, David asked, eyebrows raised. Congratulations, Kemi. Assistant head, she confirmed. New school in East London. Just over a year now. Hassan whistled. Oh wow. Big moves. Oh my God, congratulations boss lady. You deserve it mate. Kemi smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes, not fully. Then she looked at me. You remember how I started, though? Looking at Cujo. I nodded. Of course I do. Kemi. She'd been my mentee during her second placement. Bright. Fierce and thoughtful. She'd joined the same school after qualifying and stayed for 3 years. 3 hard, unrewarded years. 3 years of labor in vain. I don't know how you manage it though, Kemi added. I left because I knew I'd burn out if I stayed, she said, settling into her seat. Same crazy timetable every year. Same bottom sets, year 10 and 11. No rotation. No break. David nodded slowly. Let me guess. And no recognition? Kemi laughed dryly. None. And I wasn't failing, either. Not one of my students ever got a grade U in those 3 years. Do you know how hard that was, teaching those bottom set students? With some of those kids I was given? God bless them. We did know Kemi. We knew it hard. I ran period 0 lessons before school, 3 mornings a week. I called parents. Begged them to get their kids in for 7:30 a.m. Half of them came with hoodies over their pajamas. But they came. She laughed. She paused. Took a sip of her drink. Leadership saw all of it. All of my efforts. But every staff briefing? It was Samantha this, Samantha that. Thanks for organizing the science club. Thanks for the trip to London Zoo. They never mind that her classroom was chaos. Leadership never mind that 6 of her students got grade U one year, and 4 grade U the next. We were all quiet. Guess what leadership said? Kemi continued. Oh, some students just aren't exam ready. They blamed Samantha's students. Not Samantha. And if it had been you? Lorna asked, eyebrow raised. Kemi didn't hesitate. It would have been my fault. My marking. My lack of control. My so-called inexperience. She leaned back. You know what, Kemi said, this black girl here, carried on regardless. That's what we do. That's who we are. I gave my best to those bottom-set students, whom no one wanted to teach. God bless them. They knew I wanted the best for them. After all that hard work. No postcards from SLT for me. No thank you. But Samantha got one every year. Damn, Hassan muttered. So I left, Kemi said. New school, new borough. I was promoted after my first year. Then again. Now I'm an assistant headteacher leading Key Stage 4. She looked at me. You told me I'd rise one day. I didn't believe it then, but now I do. Thank you so much for having faith in this black girl. Kemi's story lingered in the air. We sat quietly for a moment, letting the weight of it settle. Then Lorna spoke, softly, but steady. Her voice always had that calm, measured tone. A former head of year, she'd always carried herself with grace and control, even in the most chaotic corridors. I never made it to SLT, she said. And the truth is, I didn't want it anymore. We all turned slightly toward her. A bit shocked by what she'd just said. I'd been a head of year for nearly 10 odd years. Led on safeguarding, mental health, restorative practices. All the pastoral weight, all the firefighting, all the broken students, came to my desk. She paused. Swirled the ice in her glass. And smiled painfully. I got asked to apply for assistant head once. Just once. I went through the process. Final stage. Then leadership said they were going in a different direction. Hassan tilted his head. Let me guess, that direction was white and middle class. Am I right? Common sis, tell me I was right. She smiled faintly. Male. Early 30s. External candidate. He couldn't cope. He struggled. He would sometimes ask if I could help him. I felt so sorry, he'd been thrown in the deep end. The same job I did for nearly 10 years. He lasted 1 year before transferring to another school. He said it was too intense. In a private conversation we had during one of the lunch duties, he'd said to me, I think you should apply when I am gone. I think you should, you would do better. I laughed, and thanked him for having that confidence in me. And they still didn't come back to you? Kemi asked. Lorna shook her head. They came back. But not with a promotion, with more responsibility. No title. No pay rise. They literally stripped back his responsibility, as soon as he left, and added it to mine. David sighed. The classic, stepping up without stepping forward. Exactly, she said. Sadly they used my loyalty against me. We all knew that feeling. Too well. So I made a choice, Lorna continued. I stepped down. Focused on teaching. Now I get to go home earlier. I sleep better. I've got energy for my son and daughter now. My husband is happy, and I am happier. That's all. She looked around the table. Her eyes were kind, but her voice was firm. Some of us fight to climb. Some of us fight to survive. And both choices are valid. We all nodded. Because sometimes, survival is the revolution. Lorna Zuber pulled up first. We hugged her tightly, the kind of goodbye that carries more than just, see you later. It carried gratitude. Recognition. Unspoken understanding. The rest of us walked slowly toward the overground platform. No one said much. We didn't need to. We'd laughed that night. We'd told truths we rarely got to say out loud, and somewhere between the starters and the second round of drinks, we'd stopped feeling like survivors and started feeling like witnesses. I sat by the train window, watching the city blur past, and I thought about all of it. Not just my story. Not just Hassan's, David's, Kemi's, or Lorna's. But the quieter ones. The ones still buried under silence. The ones whispered in corridors, written in resignation letters, held in the bodies of teachers who gave more than they had, and got back less than they deserved. And I remembered something my father always said, when they won't give you the mic, write your own script. So I did. To be continued in part 3. Please like, share and subscribe to support our YouTube channel. Drop a comment below, to let us know what country or city you're watching us from. Thanks for watching.